Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the June 8th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. This meeting is recorded. We post it to the Solid Waste and Recycling website within 1 week. We have a set agenda for this evening. That agenda does allow time for public comment. This evening, we do not have translation services, so I'm going to skip this slide. As far as public comment goes, only our committee chair may recognize a public attendee. And we do have 2 designated times on the agenda. For anyone that has called in on the phone, we can unmute and give you an opportunity to weigh in as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashwin.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for attending tonight. I think we can go ahead and just do introductions. Roll call. Is that something that require, even if we're not voting, to do that? Yeah, let's just go ahead and do introductions and roll call then.
Okay. We will, hold on, let me get my spreadsheet up. Give me a second. We will start with you, Ashwin.
Yep, Highway Chair Ashwin. Public member.
Sandra Smith is absent. Leslie Albert is absent. Hannah Carlson.
Hi there, Hannah Carlson, public member, recent graduate of Portland State University.
And then Christy, and pardon me, Dekanick?
Dykink.
Dykink. Okay, I'll get it on the 3rd time, I promise.
No, believe me, it's a struggle. So Christy Dykink, public member, recently appointed.
Tom Eggleston. Present, but not available. Myra Hernandez is absent. Pete Pastres is absent. Vinod Singh.
Vinod Singh, industry member.
And Brian St. John.
Present, public member, 2nd meeting, recently appointed. Happy to be here.
Great, thanks everybody.
So, Kathy, do we want to do updates? Yeah, okay. Do you want to go ahead and take that?
I'm not sure if Tom had anything he wanted to say. Yeah, I think 5 minutes or something just to talk about things like having a future in-person meeting as a possibility. If you want, I'll go ahead and just hit a couple of things on the calendar. I'll give my usual plea to have everyone try and respond when I send out my emails. So let me know you're coming. We're getting better, but there's always a few. It just, even when there's not action items, it's helpful to make sure that we have enough people for when we bring presenters in. It's just a good habit to get into. We added a couple of things to the agenda. We tentatively scheduled a residential food waste collection update in September. It's tentative. I'm not sure if that date will work, but we got a placeholder for it. And then in October, we could come back and give you all a Recycle Plus program update. I think it's good to keep track of that one since it was a new program, and we've given you an interim update already, but we changed some of the rules, and we just thought it would be good to come back in the fall and let you know how things are going. In addition, still working on scoping out an OBRC tour. So more to come, hopefully, on that. And the board is having a work session on Tuesday where they're going to hear or see and hear a couple of PowerPoints from Tom regarding the rates and the rules that you folks acted on at the last SCRAC meeting. And then once that happens, if they recommend us bringing it back, it will come back in 2 weeks for the regular action item on their June 27th agenda. That's it for me.
I think for the residential food waste collection update, what would that entail?
I'm not, you know, I would envision it would talk about the rollout, which is going to start October 1st. So it would probably encompass the education and outreach efforts and the communications that have gone out and how we're, you know, what's included, how's it going to look, you know, sort of from our program side to the community members that will be affected. I know that we're already working on it internally. So we wanted to come to GRAC hopefully and give you a heads up before it starts and get some feedback, and you can ask questions, that kind of thing. So
Okay, like a readiness
yeah.
status. Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Kathy. Sorry, I was off camera. I was on another call. It would be mostly like an education and outreach implementation plan update, Ashvin. So the education team is making plans. We do have to recognize the board hasn't approved anything yet. So this is all contingent upon the board's approval on the 27th of June.
The other item I had asked you guys about was like LCA. Is that something that we still looking to schedule in the fall? The main goal of that was just to educate the committee on a
Right.
basic LCA scenario and just so that people understand what that is.
And there's definitely some experts at DQ that you'll often hear them discuss the LCA for a given material, product, whatever. It's really dependent on whether, given the ongoing rulemakings and rollout of the RMA, when they have time, but we haven't forgot about it. It's on the list. We're working to see if we can get someone to come and do a presentation before the committee. It's really interesting. I think the committee members would get a lot out of it. So, but I'm just not sure yet when that might be scheduled.
Yeah, just making sure it's on the radar. And then for July and August, do we have things that we think might pop up, or are we looking to cancel those?
We typically cancel at least one summer meeting. It's been August most frequently, in part because it seems to be the month where there's a lot of vacations before school starts. And if we don't have an action item, then there's less of a need to convene a meeting. It doesn't have to be August. I mean, July is empty right now also. I'm trying to get the tour going, and possibly that could take the place of one of those months for a meeting, but it's something that as a committee, you guys and you as the chair could discuss and get back to us. But as it stands right now, we don't have anything that requires a recommendation from the committee at this point.
Do you have a question, Brian?
Yes, thank you, Ashwin. Tom, just real quick, I know you gave us a legislative update last time. Is all those bills kind of still stuck in the mud and dead, to put it bluntly?
Yeah, the walkout has stalled everything, and it was it's still the same status. I know that there's been some movement on the right to repair. I think it was a Senate bill. So yes, it was a Senate bill, and it stalled out in the Senate. There is an effort in the House, a House committee to hold some type of a hearing or start a conversation to put support on the record to kind of grease the skids for potentially bringing it back in the short session. So they're trying to do something in the House to build a little momentum to take it into short session, assuming it's going to perish with many other things in the Senate with the walkout.
Thank you, Tom. Appreciate it.
Tom, do you have any additional updates you want to go over? Or are we good?
No, I don't really, Ashwin. I feel like we just met and my updates are stale, except for there's still a walkout and we're going to the board on Tuesday, like
Yeah.
Kathy said, for work session, and then we'll be back there on the 27th with the action item.
Yeah, sounds good. Can continue on then. So I think, Kathy, I think in regards to your in-person meeting, maybe I'll just send out a note to most of the committee. I mean, half the committee is here. I'll just send out a poll to everybody to see if people are interested in coming. So I think we don't want to put towards the effort if people are not going to be able to make it. So we'll just see between October and September if people are interested. If there's a preference, then we can work on scheduling that.
We'll feed you.
Yeah.
I'm ready to be there, but I don't want
We're,
to sign
we're
up.
thinking, just so you all know, we're thinking about having it start early and having like food and beverage, meet and greet, come learn about your fellow committee members in person kind of thing. So if that sweetens the,
County appropriate beverages.
yes, but in the fall. So any, September, October, November, December, somewhere in there, even in the winter.
Great. The next item is oral communication. So we can open up the floor if anybody in the public attendees is interested in making a public comment or question.
So the public could, if they're interested, could raise their hand, or we have the Q&A open as well.
Does not look like anybody wants to make a comment at this time, so we can continue on the agenda. So the next item is the first presentation, collection service providers. You can hand it over to the representatives. Kristen, Lexi, and Dave. I don't know who's
Yeah.
presenting it, or
Kathy, do you have the slides or do you need me to pull them up?
If you want to run it yourself, then you could just share your screen since you're a panelist. I was going to ask if there's any interest in me pulling up the rate sheet first and just showing what some of these fees are. If not, we'll just turn it right over to you guys. It's really up to the chair if you want.
If you could flash that up, I think that's good.
Okay.
I think I'm familiar with it. I don't know how familiar everybody else is. So
Yeah, why don't I share my screen and I'll just point out some of the residential additional fees that can be charged. Okay, give me a moment. Well, okay, maybe not. This is now our whole Zoom formatting has changed, and finding where it is interesting. Here, let me try.
Green button on the bottom. So
I did, but oh, there, I found
Okay.
them. Thank you. I had to open it first and then it showed up. Okay, so if you all can see, or if it's too big, I can shrink it. Here.
Yeah, that's good size. Yeah.
Oh, okay, if you're good. So we have, in addition to those regular garbage recycling, yard debris, if you're in urban, glass, battery pickup that's charged monthly, we also have a rate sheet that covers additional services and fees. And these are typically the one-time only kind of fees, or they happen per occurrence. And one of them, we have a couple of them that are extra can bag bundles of either yard debris, which is $340 for urban. Obviously nothing for rural because they don't get yard debris. And then we have extra bag bundles of garbage. And it's really, when you consider what your monthly garbage rate is, it's pretty expensive to put out an extra bundle or an extra bag of garbage if you do it frequently, it's $7.07. And these rates, by the way, are the current rates. They're going to go up slightly with if they get approved, if the new rates get approved. We also have callbacks, and that's often if through customer action, a collections miss, like maybe they had the car blocking or they didn't get their card out on time, and then they call up their service provider and say, hey, I really need it picked up this week. Can you come back? Well, then they're going to get a callback fee in return for the service provider having to make a special stop. There's a whole bunch of ones. One of the ones we hear about a lot, and you may or may not have had that incurred this charge yourself, is the overcapacity charge. And that's the fee charged when your container's overfilled, and you often hear it referred to as like a smiley can fee or a smiling can fee, so that the lid doesn't shut all the way. You may get charged the fee for that. And then there's, probably fees that you would expect to see: a non-sufficient funds charge fee, reinstatement fee if you get essentially disconnected and then you sign up again. You're going to get charged that fee. And then we have an hourly rate fee that is often used for like that bulky item pickup. You want your sofa taken away, well, you're going to pay $75 plus the actual, all the disposal costs. So those are the more typical ones. I think the ones that are assessed most often are the extra bag bundles and the overcapacity charge. So, and Brian has a question.
Just quickly. So thank you. The overcapacity versus extra bag. Extra bag means that it has to be outside of the can, and overcapacity's definition is that the lid is just a jar.
Well, we'll hear for some of the service
Okay,
providers.
maybe we'll save that. Yeah, that's good.
But I would
Yeah.
say if there's a big old bag sitting on top of
Mhm.
your cart, that's an extra bag.
Gotcha.
Whether it's sitting next to it or on top of it, it's the bag, full bag sitting there that generates the fee.
Trash bag Jenga to avoid the fee. Just stack
We've seen some pretty creative shrink wrap strategies. So like garbage piling out of the can and shrink wrapped up.
Mhm.
So
And the fees are regardless, every provider will charge the same fee, right?
They do.
Okay, got it.
I mean, the fees are, all of our providers in unincorporated Washington County charge the same thing for the same service. So, okay, if there aren't any other questions, I'll stop sharing and turn it over to Kristen.
And Kathy, if it's okay, if you don't mind running the slides, because then otherwise I have too many screens with my notes and all that stuff. But I
Okay.
can run it if that's easier.
I will need to find it.
Okay. I've got
Yeah.
it pulled up if that's easier.
Give me a half a second here.
Okay.
I'll see if I can grab it. All righty. Oops. So, okay, I found it. Now I'll go ahead and try and share it, and you can just let me know when you want me to advance.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
So I'll introduce myself first since I'm going first, and then I'll let the other presenters introduce themselves when it gets to their turn. So hi, everybody. I'm Kristen Leichner. I'm the president and one of the owners of Pride Disposal and Recycling Company, and we're located in Sherwood, Oregon, and we are one of the certificated haulers in unincorporated Washington County. So next slide, please, Kathy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that my company uses to identify the extras, as well as how that charge kind of makes its way through the system. So all of our trucks have onboard computers in the cabs. We use a system called Routeware. So each driver has a tablet inside of their truck. with the entire route that's mapped out for them, including the address, the customer information, and the service level for the commodity that the driver is picking up. So a garbage driver would have all of the detail for the garbage service, but wouldn't necessarily know like how many recycling carts customer had or yard debris carts, because that's how the system works. So the driver indicates what in that tablet in their truck, whether or not they picked up a cart or not through Routeware. So the default reason for not picking something up is not out, but they do have a menu of options to choose from. So not out is the most common reason. So they use the system to indicate that, but if they don't pick it up because it is recycling is contaminated or because a cart is blocked, they can go to their menu and look at those other options and choose one of those. And then in addition to that menu, there's also an extras menu for the driver to assess charges based on what is approved in the jurisdiction. So the driver doesn't see the total charge. They just have a menu to choose from that list that Kathy showed. So whether it's an extra bag or an extra bundle of yard debris, or if it's an overload charge, those are the options that they have in their extras menu. So all of that information gets entered into the tablet. It's time and date stamped, and all those trucks also have GPS in them, so it can verify the location. And then that comes back into our customer maintenance software. And any extra charges that come out of Routeware create a work order in the customer billing software. Those work orders are then released to billing, and then they would show up on the customer's next invoice. So it doesn't create, a unique bill just for that individual extra charge. It does just show up on their next regular invoice. And next slide, Kathy. So these pictures are truly pictures that we've taken out en route in our service area that we use for identification, for training for our drivers. So these are the kinds of things that we would charge extras for. So you can see the individual photos. You can see at the top of each photo how we've kind of designated what these extras are for. And for your question, Brian, the way that we designate it is if you can see that it is a bag causing the lid to be open, like a small kitchen bag, that's when we charge an overload charge. You'll see on the next slide some examples of where, the lid was open, but we didn't charge. And we consider an overload to be the equivalent of a small bag, a kitchen size garbage bag, where an extra bag we consider to be a large black 32-gallon bag. So if it's on the top of the can, we charge it as the overload fee. If it's on top of the can, like in that second photo, and it's clearly a large bag, it's more than one bag causing that lid to be open. They don't just get charged for the one bag, they get charged for the equivalent. That third photo is an overload charge and an extra can next to it. And then the fourth photo is an overload and 2 small bags, which are equivalent to an overload. That item on the bottom right is basically the wrapping of like a 12-pack of water. We don't charge for that. We just get out and pick it up, just like we would the extra bag, because it's not substantial in terms of volume. And all the extra charges are based on volume, not weight. Next slide, Kathy. So these are all examples of carts where the lids are open, but we train our drivers on items like this not to charge. So the first few photos you can see there's something large, too long for the cart. Like the first item, it looks like there's like a spring. The second item, it looks like there's maybe a camping chair causing it to be open. A couple of the other photos in the middle have, a couple branches sticking out or a small bag. And that one on the far right, if it's one of those things where the lid's only partially open, if the customer had pushed a little bit and let the air out of the bag and then the lid would have been closed, we don't charge for items like that. So that slide previous are all the things we would charge for. This slide is examples of things that we don't charge for. So that's pretty basic related to the extra charges. And then I will turn it over to Lexi and next slide for her.
Kristen, one question for you.
Oh, sure.
Do you guys take pictures of these on the route to document it, or is the driver just noting the issue?
So our trucks have cameras on them that record video, and that's primarily used for safety. So they have a backup camera, they have a blind spot camera, they have a hopper camera that shows what's coming out of the cart, which also is used to help identify contamination and things like that in recycling. But then we can pull the video after the driver returns from route and review it. So as I mentioned earlier, it might take a few weeks for the customer to see this on their bill because of our billing cycles. Some customers are only billed every other month. So you might have a charge that you generated in early June, but you don't get a bill until mid-July. And sometimes customers forget that maybe they had family over and had a bunch of extra garbage that they put out. So they'll see that charge on their bill and then they'll call us. And if they would like us to, we can go back and review the video and pull a screenshot of it and send them the photo of it. But we don't take pictures at every stop, but it is constantly recording just for safety. And so we do have the ability to go back and review that.
So if it is disputed, you do have documentation, but it's not something that's reviewed.
Yes.
Okay.
And there
Thanks.
are systems that exist out there that do allow folks to take photos that kind of can be integrated with that routing system that we use. But we used the onboard video cameras before our tablet system offered that as a feature. And so getting the two systems to talk together can be a little bit difficult. So that's how we do it.
Tom, do you have a question?
Yeah, thanks. Kristen, I'm curious. Kathy highlighted one of the rates was like the callback. And so like if I, as the customer, forgot to get my cart out there and then the truck drove by and I was like, oh. And so then I missed it. It was my fault. If I call customer service, what options would they offer me? Would they say we can come back and get it now, or what
Yeah,
happens
so-
if I set it out next week? I guess is where I'm going to as well.
Yeah, so generally what we try to do the first time is get folks to put out double their garbage the following week at no charge. So if a customer has a 32-gallon can, we say, you know, sorry, we missed you this week, whether it was their fault or our fault. That's what we first try for, to be not have to send drivers back off route to an area that we may not be in the following day. So if they have a 32-gallon can that holds 3 small kitchen bags or 1 large black bag, we tell them they can put out that equivalent number of bags on their next collection, either next to or on top of their cart, and we'll pick those up at no charge. We offer the same thing with yard debris. They can put out the craft bags, or if they have a personal can, they can put out double the volume. So consistently for all the services. And then the callback fee that you mentioned, that is an option as well. Generally, we empower our CSRs that if the customer hasn't, you know, they don't make a habit of doing such things, generally we'll go back at no charge on the first time. And then if it happens again, we would charge that callback fee.
Thank you.
And sorry, acronyms, CSR, customer service reps. I shouldn't use acronyms.
Brian, question?
Yeah, just real quick. So I'm just real curious around, how do you handle, like, you know, because I have strange cars sometimes parking in front of my house, right? Put my can out at night, next morning, somebody's parked there. Do the drivers typically try to move the can, or would that just be a miss?
Generally, the expectation is that the cart be accessible on collection day, but our drivers are usually pretty good about knowing kind of what is the norm for customers. We try to keep drivers on the same routes. And so if it seems out of the norm that they're not usually blocked, we try and empower our drivers that at least the first time get out and move the cart for the customer, and then maybe leave them a note about what happened. And then if it happens again, then they would just leave the cart because it would be blocked.
Great. I think I've met most of you, but my name's Lexi Garbarino. I'm the owner at Garbarino Disposal. And to be honest, the story is somewhat similar as Pride's, as we've said, you know, as Washington County haulers, we all operate somewhat similarly. The difference between Garbarino Disposal and Pride and Washington, honestly, also Waste Management, is going to be the technology that we have on board. So we're a little bit more old school in how we are recording these things. We have the same mentality and instructions for our drivers and requirements for the customer as Pride does. So the pictures are the same and would apply the same. The terminology is the same. The difference is how we record the extras. So we have our drivers record the extra on an extra sheet that's provided to each driver, and they actually record the physical can number so that we can make sure it's associated with the correct customer. We do get customers calling asking about extras quite a bit, and we're able to provide the exact cart number. And if there's ever a dispute, we have them have them provide us their cart number. And we don't have the cameras on board our trucks right now. We're working on implementing that. But what we do is if it's a consistent problem with a customer, we make a note to the driver to take pictures on their cell phones of that, so that we do have record of that information, so that if there is a dispute, we can talk to them about that. And what we typically try to do is if there are continuous extras from the customer service standpoint, we've instructed our customer service people to reach out to that customer and maybe talk to them about increasing their cart size, which would ultimately be less expensive for them than continuing to have extras, which also saves our drivers time having to write down the extras. So Not too much different to report on our side, but happy to answer any questions if there are any. That's the only
No, I
slide.
think-
I want to present.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Lexi. So hey, good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Huber. I'm WM's public sector manager here for all of Oregon. But formerly, I was the senior district manager for our operations here in Washington County. So, you know, and to give you some perspective, we have 2 collection operations here in Washington County. We have our bigger site, our facility in Forest Grove, that houses most of our trucks. About 65 trucks leave that yard every day. Services portions of Washington County, Beaverton, Forest Grove, Gaston, small section of Tigard, and then we have an Aloha site in Aloha. It was a acquisition about 3 years ago, and we've kept it there at that site. And that particular operations just covers the general Washington County unincorporated area there in Aloha. And then they also service a small section of the city of Hillsborough in Beaverton as well. So thanks for having me on this evening. So yeah, we have our company has new technology, and it's called WM Smart Truck technology. Our trucks are all equipped with cameras, and they have multiple cameras on the truck. For example, there's a camera that's on the automated arm of the vehicle. There's a backup camera on it. And then on the front load trucks, commercial front load trucks, there's cameras that are looking out the front windshield of the trucks as well. Our drivers all have tablets in the trucks. And before this new technology came out, we really kind of ran the same type of, scenario with extras. The drivers would identify the extras on their tablets in the cabs of the trucks, mark them, whether it was, 1 bag, 2 bags, etc. But with this new technology, it's really taken that away from the drivers. So all they need to worry about is making sure that the carts are emptied. The extras are picked up if the extras are off to the side or, not in the cart themselves. And then this technology, it's video recorded, and I'll show you on the, don't move the slide yet, Kathy, but I'll show you on the next slide what that process shows. But as you can see in this slide, it's a pretty busy slide. The camera is really twofold. There's sustainability, we're trying to achieve sustainability goals here, really trying to minimize contamination and ensure that the materials are going in the right and in the right bucket. So if there's for example, if there's garbage that's getting put in the recycling truck, we can identify it with these cameras, reach out to the customer, let them know, and try to correct that issue. So it's not only sustainable, but it's educational as well. Health and safety, of course, we want to identify the overages if there are, and get those off the streets to prevent the litter. And as I think Lexi and Kristen kind of spoke to it as well. We always try to encourage the customers, if there's consistent extras, if they have consistent extras, to upsize or, get the right size cart for their needs. Because ultimately it really is more cost effective for the customer. Okay, so now Kathy, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. So yeah, the process is fairly simple. With the camera mounted trucks, they or the cameras that are mounted in the trucks, they capture the footage of the carts that are collected during service. We have a team, technical team that reviews the footage associated with each one of those and make sure that the materials are collected successfully. And if there are extras, that's when they identify the extras and apply it to that particular account, and then the customer will see it on their next invoice. So it's a very smooth process. You know, it's only been out for about the last year and a half, 2 years. And it's, you know, initially, you know, we were capturing, you know, it's a little bit of our artificial intelligence. So when, you know, it's GPS driven. So when the truck is in the neighborhood, it'll identify the cart, and then it captures where the cart is in front of the house to, you know, track the extras. However, you know, when we first started, there were some issues with that, but I think we've weeded those out, and you know, it's a successful way to really track the extras and get them to the customers if it's needed. So other than that, I think, you know, that's the process. You know, feel free to, if you have any questions, please reach out.
Yeah, Brad, go ahead.
Yeah, so for all three of you, first of all, thank you for being here. You know, you guys being willing to be transparent with the residents and the businesses really helps, you know, the whole community understand, you know, no one likes fees, right? I've personally gotten a fee and it wasn't fun, but I do have a question about it, and I'll focus it on you, Dave, because I am a Waste Management customer. Y'all have treated me well over the years. But I am curious because I just realized this looking at Kathy's fee schedule, so I quickly pulled it up. I've had a Smiling Can fee, but I got charged the $707 instead of the $275. How does that determined? Because I got the picture, right, you know, and it's just the can, the lid's up. It wasn't an extra bag or nothing. How is that determined, and how does someone dispute that typically? Because when I'm looking at my bill, and the other two companies, feel free to weigh in as well, because I'm curious about that process.
Yeah, no, good question. You know, I appreciate that. I know it, and so, you know, it's really identified when the technicians are looking at those carts where you know, there's a Smiley Can, they're really looking to identify whether they can, you know, identify whether it's a bag. And if it is a small, even a, you know, a small kitchen bag, that's when it gets, you know, tracked as that extra garbage bag, which is the higher rate. But, you know, to your other question, you know, if the customer wants to dispute it, and we've had that, I mean, that happens, they'll call in and say, you know, hey, wait a minute, I don't think this is right. You know, they certainly have that ability to call in, ask the questions. And like you said, you know, we have the video, we have the pictures, so that we can provide them for it. And if there's any dispute whatsoever, we always, you know, we are always kind of lenient towards the, you know, hey, we don't want to take advantage of that. If they feel like that wasn't fair, you know, we'll do a one-time credit, but then let them know that, you know, hey, but this is really how it works. You know, as we could see it here, it looks like it is a kitchen bag, and that's why we charged it that way. So hopefully
is there a time limit on those typically for all three? I mean, is there, you know, if it's been 6 months, too bad, so sad type of thing, or?
You know, that's a good question, Brian. I could check with our billing department, but I would imagine that you could probably, I mean, certainly go back, you know, the last 2 months. I'm not sure if you know, going beyond that, if that's you know, doable at that point, but I can certainly follow up and let you know that for sure.
Yeah, I'm curious. And Lexi or Kristen, is it the same for you guys as far as what Dave described his process?
Yeah, so our process is similar in terms of, as I mentioned, we do have the video. So if customer questions the charge, we'll pull that up. And there are times that we feel, oh, the driver kind of charged that wrong. And so we'll adjust it if we feel like they were overcharged based on what the extras are, or occasionally they've charged the wrong home. We correct that when we find that as well. And then in terms of disputes, we do have on our bills that customers have 30 days from the date of the statement to dispute any charges. And mainly that's because, as I mentioned with the video, we only hold so much recording. And so if a customer calls and says, well, I got charged for an extra back in January, we don't have the capability to go back and look at that because it only holds so much data. So that's the main reason why we have the timeline on it.
Question or comment, Kathy?
You want me to weigh in first, or Christie
You-
has a question.
You had
Either,
your
either
hand
way.
raised first. Please go ahead.
Okay, I would, just a couple of things. So while the presentation was going on, I leafed through the admin rules. And in terms of the callback issue, the first question, it's actually the process is set in rule. Customers always have two choices. If they've caused the miscollection, they can either have the hauler return and get the callback fee, or they could notify their service provider and put out twice their normal volume. So like Kristen was saying, if it normally fits 3 bags, 2 little ones and a big one, you can put those in the next week, and then the additional 3 bags that you would have put in at no extra charge. In terms of disputes, we actually have rules around that. One option is if you feel like you haven't gotten, as a customer, that you haven't gotten satisfaction, you can always file a complaint with us and we would investigate. Secondly, in the rules, there honestly isn't a time limit to bring a dispute. Now, the evidence around it may go away. I'm very appreciative of the not wanting to store months and months and months of video recording or photographs or whatever it may be, but it doesn't explicitly prevent older disputes. And then finally, if you have a dispute of a specific charge, as long as you pay all your other charges, you can't be you can't have your service terminated while the dispute is being resolved and investigated. So that gives a little bit of time for all parties to kind of look into the situation and come hopefully to some agreement.
Thanks, Kathy. Christy, your question?
Yeah, can you give us any sense of the scope of the problem? Like some percent of the pickups that you do have some sort of extra fee? I have no idea how common these fees are.
I don't have data specifically to give you, but I can tell you that anecdotally, most customers don't generate these charges very often. You might have a customer that, has it once a year or something like that, but any number I might throw out as a total guess on my part, because I haven't done the analysis, but I can tell you anecdotally, it's not super common. You have kind of your repeat offenders, if you will. But to Lexi's point, we all, I think, try to communicate with those folks and suggest to them that if you're having regular recurring extras, most of the time it's more cost effective to move to the larger cart. And so we try and encourage folks to do that because it helps keep the streets cleaner. You don't have raccoons or crows or whatever getting into the bags, and it makes the driver's jobs easier. So we try and encourage folks to do that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Christine. I wish I had the data for it too, because I'm kind of a data geek when it comes to that. But I think it's I think it's safe to say it's probably less than 15%, where there's extras out there on the route. I'm just kind of taking a good stab at it based off how we used to do the extras, but and some of it can be geographical too. Some communities you just don't see a lot, but others you do. But yeah, it's certainly a good question.
Maybe along those same lines, I'm a big rule follower myself, and so it bothers me seeing other people not follow the rules. But at least in my neighborhood, it seems like people consistently have smiley cans. And the only time I received a charge is when I got mistakenly charged for my neighbor's one. And that's kind of what sparked my interest in this. So I'm just kind of curious, I didn't notice that I'd been charged until my bill came out and the number went up. It wasn't like there was a special notification. I'd almost prefer the old school. I get a note on my cart from the mailman sometimes if I put it too close to my mailbox, and I see that right away. So I guess I'm kind of curious when you say about education, like you talk about you good to repeat offenders. Is that like common, or can we is there, I don't know if there's anything even in the code that requires some sort of special notification so that people are even aware that they're getting these extra charges, because everyone's encouraged to do auto pay, and a small $250 here they may not notice, especially after 2 months. you got to be kind of vigilant to catch these things. I guess I'm kind of curious on that education aspect, you know, maybe more specifics on when you would follow up with people. And then also, like, I don't know, if we could just make sure that people are seeing this so that we can, you know, solve the problem.
I think I'll take that question. And I think quickly to answer that question, the way that we communicate it is when there are repeat offenders, it's typically someone who's frustrated with that, and we want to help them with that situation. But I think I kind of want to flip the narrative here, because it's not like we're trying to charge, right? Like, this is a situation where we're being charged for this disposal, and ultimately each ratepayer is ultimately being charged for this disposal of these extras. So it's not like there's somebody who's causing a lot of problems, and sometimes people have more trash, and that's okay. It's not somebody not following the rules. It's not someone who is in trouble for putting trash out, right? And we're not like reprimanding them for putting trash out. What we're doing is keeping the rates low because that person has put too much trash out. It's like if you bought 1 banana versus 2 bananas, you have to pay for the weight of the 2 bananas versus 1 banana. And I think that's one way to think about it, in the sense of, rather than, and I'm happy to answer these questions. I think it's important to share this to the community and have everyone understand, but this is not a situation where we're trying to gouge the customer or like call out somebody being bad. You know, this is a way that we're able to make it fair for you as an individual, not having to pay for someone else breaking a rule if they were to break a rule, but they're not. You know, this is just a way that we're able to manage that, I guess.
That's fair. I guess maybe more in the context of how do they know that they weren't in compliance? Like, if they're not diligently watching their bill, how well are they being notified that they are not in compliance, so that they can correct that behavior, so that they cannot be charged? Because my worry is that people are not even aware that they're being charged, because I don't think I would see people repeatedly doing it over and over again if they're being charged, or if you're reaching out to them and saying, hey, let's get a bigger can. Because I even talking to my neighbors, say, yeah, just get a bigger can, you're going to save yourself some money. It definitely makes sense for everybody in that situation. So that's why I'm just kind of curious about that notification, maybe is the best way to say it.
Yeah, I guess I would add to what Lexi said, kind of in the same vein of, you know, the extra charges. I mean, to put it kind of bluntly, the bill is the notification, you know, and if we were to have to send out an additional notification or another letter every time somebody had an extra charge, it would really increase all of our costs. And ultimately, if our costs go up because we're having to mail out another letter or another notification, it adds cost to the system, which adds cost to everybody. And so, you know, I think the theory behind the franchise system is that if a particular customer needs an extra service, for example, somebody wants us to walk up their driveway to get their garbage cart because they don't want to take it out to the curb, there's a fee for that individual customer pays, rather than the whole system paying for that extra time to do that service. And so similarly, if somebody's generating extra garbage, some people will get a larger garbage can, which has a higher rate. For the folks that are maybe occasionally trying to squeeze too much into a smaller can, it's not fair for neighbor A, who pays for a 60-gallon cart. Neighbor B pays for a 32-gallon cart, but then puts out extras and have to pay for those extras. It creates an imbalance in the system. And so, you know, the rates are set based on volumes, and we pay for disposal based on weight. And so when you have extra garbage out, it costs us more in disposal. And so it's trying to make the cost causer pay for the cost that they have generated. So I totally understand your point about, we have a lot of customers that are on auto pay and they don't open their bills. And sometimes they set up their online banking to pay us monthly, and they get billed every other month. And all of a sudden they have a $500 credit on their bill, and we send them a letter, and then they don't have to open that either. So then they just keep paying us monthly, and it exacerbates the problem. So it is a struggle to get that across, especially as more people sign up for auto pay and things like that. But I'm not quite sure how to solve that without adding additional costs to the system by sending out more notifications.
Yeah. So in terms of like, maybe like you said, you reached out to repeat offenders, so what would that, like, are we talking about like twice a year, 4 times a year? Like, what is considered too much where you would then actually reach out to them?
Typically, we'll have a driver who will indicate to us, like, this customer needs more service. And that can even be on the recycling side, where there isn't necessarily a charge to have additional service. They just need an extra recycling cart because they continuously, you know, they get a lot of home deliveries, they have a lot of boxes. So, you know, The drivers prefer to stay in their trucks if possible and use the automated arms on their trucks to service the carts. And so if they're having to get out regularly to pick up extra bags or extra cardboard, they'll be sure to let us know when there's a customer that maybe needs more service, so we place a phone call to them. Generally is how we start, try to get a hold of the customer to say, hey, our drivers noticed you have extras on a regular basis. We've looked at your bill. It would actually be more cost effective to go larger. But also the reality is the smiley cans, the overload charges, even if you're having those 2 and 3 times a month, it actually, for the most part, it's not enough additional cost to warrant going to the larger cart. Because, it depends on kind of where that price gap is and how often you have the extras. So just because somebody has an extra bag once a month or a smiley can 2 to 3 times a month, it might not actually be more cost effective for them to go to a larger cart. So, we try to look at that for each individual situation and help guide customers that need the help.
Okay, thanks. Brian, do you have a question?
Can I add a little bit, Brian, before?
Yeah, go for it,
the
Tom.
question? I would just say, Ashvin, and I think Lexi, correct me if I'm wrong, but Garbarino has a practice of using a misprep notice. So it's kind of like a leave behind on a garbage can or a roll cart. And that'd be like if the car's parked too close, or there's something blocking access. The county develops and provides misprep notices for recycling contamination. We do not develop and provide misprep notices for operational things like cars parked too close or those types of issues, but we do work with the haulers. If they want to provide those notices, then that's totally acceptable for them to do that. So that's another mechanism that's sometimes used, but I think for many of these charges, like the smiley can in particular, if it's on an automated route and it can just be picked up on an automated arm, the time it takes for the driver to get out and stop and go out and attach a tag to the roll cart to notify the customer about the overcharge is a burden that might not be, the juice might not be worth the squeeze, but there's also, the extras. So there's different things that there's other ways to communicate with the customers, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And some haulers do that more than others, depending on how automated their routes are and those types of operational things. But the rules don't really require that as they're currently situated. And please correct me if I misspoke, Lexi, because I think we worked with you guys like a year ago on those notices.
Oh, sorry, I guess I'm jumping in. So first comment, I totally have to support Ashwin's comment about the bill, because with the auto pay, it just kind of disappears sometimes. And I get that you guys don't want to have extra processes, but it does feel like it sneaks up on you unexpectedly. The question I have, and when I knew we were having this, because I always like to talk to my neighbors, and many of them feel like the garbage service is like the old school cell phone minutes, right? Remember that you get 500 minutes. So you get a 20-gallon cart. If you don't use them all, they don't roll over. That's too bad. So sad, right? Type of thing. So when you get a fee for it just sticking up a little bit, I feel like sometimes, well, maybe I shouldn't even put it in a bag. Let me just dump all the raw garbage in so I could get all the air out of the cart and maximize my 20 gallons. So is there any leeway that you guys do in your programs with the fees to say, yeah, you haven't had a fee in a year or 18 months and we'll let it go type of thing this time? I'm just curious on that, because it does feel like there's times where I put out a half empty can and y'all still charge me for 20, but I only gave you 10 gallons worth of garbage. Does that make sense logically, Lexi and Kristen and Dave? Okay. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, no, I understand where you're coming from there, Brian. And I think that it's something that, yeah, probably the old school way. I guess as a residential customer, I would probably feel that same way too. But to manage that, and to, really work that system, I mean, it would be very cumbersome, to say the least, to try to, okay, well, this customer, he's got a 35-gallon cart, but he only usually puts 20 in. So it is old school. I mean, that's kind of the way it was back in the day. I will be honest. I mean, I've been in the business for just almost 31 years, and that's kind of the way it used to be. But yeah, with the automation system the way it is now, it's just, you've got a 20-gallon cart. We hope that you do fill it up every week and, utilize as much space as you can. And that's kind of I guess, the goal there.
I also think the rate structure is set up in a way that if you don't have a full cart, you have the option for on-call service. So I think that that is something that I would empower an individual, not even with garbage, but with your cell phone, right? Like you would use your cell phone the same way. If I don't use all 500 of my minutes, I'm going to reduce my plan. And anytime we are, I agree. I would love to be able to notify every single one of my customers when, like when a can isn't picked up, because it is hard for it's more money for me to answer the phone for my customer and then call you back and then have my driver go back and use all the fuel. And ultimately that's exactly what you're paying for. So the more we can try to efficiently work together, I think is like the piece we're trying to do. And I'm so happy to be able to come to these meetings, to have these conversations with you guys, because I think there is quite a disconnect between garbage industry in general and the community. And these guys work so hard. These men and women work so hard out there picking up the garbage and literally carrying away stuff that we don't want. Sometimes I think about that and I'm like, I think we should bow down to these people. They're taking away everything. I mean, I don't drive the garbage truck, so I have a lot of respect for them, but I hear you. I think that there are absolutely options to reduce your service if you feel that you're being overcharged for that. I think the thing we need to talk about in this meeting is when people are taking advantage of the system and not getting charged. And, I think it's important to have that extra fee and important to hold those people accountable that do. And if those people are frustrated or if the bill is frustrated, I hope that if you're worried about spending money, that you check those bills. I can as a company and as an individual and as somebody trying to provide a service for the community, we can only do so much with the money we're provided to be able to help the best we can. And I think the coolest thing is that we're providing service to every customer, right? Like we've had conversations about other companies coming in and we literally will service every single person in our community to the best of our ability. And I think that's something really important to think about when we talk about what we're talking about today.
Yeah, if I could just add one minor thing, I think Lexi and Dave did great answering that question. And the only other thing I would add, just I think is important context for the group as well, is that any of these fees that we charge, whether it's a callback fee or an extra bag fee or any of those things, all of that revenue is accounted for as part of that annual report that we all turn into the county. So I think there's sometimes a perception in the general public that and I get it, nobody likes feeling like they've been nickel and dimed, but especially if you feel like you're being nickel and dimed and we're just putting that in our back pocket and we're not going to tell anybody about it. That's not at all true. That all goes into the whole revenue piece that is used to analyze the cost of service and rate of return and all of those pieces. And so again, it goes back to making sure that the people who are generating the cost, which generates the revenue, that they pay for that individually rather than spreading the cost for those extra fees across everybody, trying to make sure that it's a fair system for everybody.
I do think that's an important point, Kristen. Brian, if we can assume that the cost is what the cost is, and the revenue is what the revenue is, it's less of I think the fees are more of a way that those costs are distributed to the customers in a sense, right? Because somebody's going to pay for it if the cost is what the cost is in the system. So if the can is half full, that's cheaper. But on average, the cans are 3/4 full. And so the rates it's an averages. The law of averages, essentially. So different fees are different ways to distribute the costs in the system, in a sense. We could have a system with no extra fees, and then all the costs it takes, the extra time to get out and pick up those bags, would be averaged and everybody would pay the same thing, and the average would be higher because you would pull those costs, those revenues out, if that makes sense.
Well, thank you for coming and presenting that to us and educating us on this. Really helpful. We all appreciate learning about it. It is kind of a black box, so thank you for shedding light. So we can probably wrap it up there and move on to the next item, the Metro Garbage and Recycling Systems Facility Plan.
Thank you for having us on. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for dedicating your time to this too. I appreciate it. It's good to see you.
Should we just take it away or?
Yeah.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Esty Siegel. I am a planner and project manager at Metro with our Waste Prevention and Environmental Services group, and I'm here with Luis Sandoval, my colleague and teammate. We both are working on this garbage and recycling system facility plan. I'm going to share my screen and show you a couple slides that we sent to you in advance. So hopefully some of you have taken a look. But if not, we will go through them.
So quick point of order for the
Yes.
chair. So could I just simply ask for a quick definition of what Metro is? Because I think I know what it is and I did some Googling, but I thought it was a private company, but it sounds like it's a government entity from what I read. So maybe a 20-second intro for the audience would help because I'm kind of confused as well.
Sure. Did you ask from the chair or from?
Well,
from
I
me?
wanted to interrupt and I know I'm supposed to go through the
Oh, yeah.
chair and I'm
Oh,
trying
got
to
it, got it.
commentary and stuff. So I'm technically asking Ashwin this, if that would be okay.
Yeah, see if you could explain that. Otherwise, I would defer to Tom to provide eloquent description of anything. I will not.
Yeah, I can do as a staff person there, I can do a 20-second overview and then Tom or Luis can add, but Metro is our regional government that focuses on 3 counties and 27 cities, and Metro is unique in that way, and not many places in the United States have a regional government made up of multiple jurisdictions. We do. Metro has about 3 main departments, and they are planning and transportation is one, parks and nature is one, and then waste prevention and environmental services is another. We also manage and operate regional facilities like the zoo, like the performing arts, the P5 centers. So Metro has, we look at regional wide issues, and again, Luis and I are from the Waste Prevention and Environmental Services Department. Tom, Luis, anything to add to the 5 seconds to go?
I would just add a little bit, Brian, for context and how we interact with Metro. So the state of Oregon DEQ has high-level policies and rules regarding garbage collection in the state of Oregon. The Opportunity to Recycle Act, or S459A, lays out certain requirements. Metro is the waste shed authority for the Metro region, is what they're designated as. So they are kind of the designated planning authority for the metropolitan region for kind of DEQ compliance purposes. So the regional waste plan serves as our state required solid waste management plan in the Metro region. So Metro kind of acts as a regional layer between local government and the state and does planning, and they also do operate the transfer and disposal part of our system as well.
Appreciate it. Thank you both.
Sure, and I am going to cover a little bit higher than just this project, so that might help a little bit too, or I hope it's helpful. But first, just wanted to say thanks for inviting us. And I think that a colleague of ours, Hyla Ritter, was with you, some of you. I know a lot of you are new to the group, but I think back in January, she did an overview of the solid waste system. And so I think my understanding is that she mentioned this current planning work that we're doing around this facilities plan, and that rose up as an area of interest. So Luis and I are here today to just give you a bit of context for what we do in our department, and then really try to drill down a little bit more specifically on this project that we're working on. And some of you on the call, like Tom and Vinod, are stakeholders working on this plan with Metro and have been involved in a couple of the phases of the project. So the purpose of being with you tonight, and we're going to try to go a little quicker than planned, just because the time framing and some commitments that I have tonight. But just the purpose is to introduce this facility plan project and set it in the context of our what we call it the 2030 regional waste plan that guides the broad work of cities and local government and Metro. We want to provide an overview of what we have learned so far in doing this work on this system facility plan, highlight a few learnings and things we've heard from Washington County in particular, and then offer ways that you can track the project and contribute. So just to start off at a high level, the 2030 regional waste plan is a vision for Greater Portland's garbage and recycling system and a blueprint for achieving the vision. It was created in partnership with cities and counties, local businesses, and community leaders to set direction for how we manage and improve the system over 10 years. And it was approved in 2019 and it goes through 2030. The plan includes a regional call to action for a proactive approach to reduce negative impacts on human health, climate, and the environment caused from the full life cycle of a product and considering solutions for both consumers and producers. And I will post a link, or Louise could post a link to where on our website the full regional waste plan is if you're interested in learning more. So the regional waste plan sets out goals in 5 areas of work, and the goals in each area focus on addressing, again, the impact of materials from production to disposal and addressing community needs in the garbage and recycling system. And then there's action items within each goal, and they represent the concrete steps being taken to help reach each goal. So one example of an action item under, say, goal 7 is, which is around, goal 7 is to reduce product environmental impacts and waste through policies that support prevention practices and better purchasing choices. So an example of an action under goal 7, action 7.2, is to implement policies that will reduce the use of single-use products, such as single-use plastic bags. So I just wanted to give an example of just like one goal and how an actions sit under that, but there are over 100 actions, so there's a lot in there, and Metro is working on implementation of the goals and actions over time. So what we do is we have something called the Regional Waste Plan Progress Report, and it evaluates our progress towards each goal by monitoring the status of action items and by measuring indicators over time. And so we published our last progress report in January 2023, and it's the second in a series of progress reports, and it covers the calendar year of 2021. So the report really underscores the region's collective progress towards the priorities in the plan, and all told, over half, about 59% of the 108 actions in the plan are currently underway. So that's just to set some framework around what we as a department at Metro and cities and counties are focused on broadly. And then the work that we're here to talk about today, the work that I'm the project manager of, is focused on one of the goals, goal 16 in the regional waste plan. And really this, what we're calling a system facility plan, will be a companion document, companion plan to the regional waste plan that further clarifies the direction Metro and its partners could take to upgrade and modernize the infrastructure and facilities needed to meet our goals of greater waste reduction and recovery of materials in our region. And so the plan will assess how our current garbage and recycling system is working, where there are gaps and opportunities, and consider potential solutions to improve facilities such as recycling centers, reuse centers, depots, and transfer stations. And the plan will clarify our Metro's intended actions to improve our existing garbage and recycling facilities, such as our transfer stations, as well as Metro Paint, and then looking at the facilities needed in the future to better manage and ideally reduce the materials we all are throwing away. So we're currently in phase 3 of this project, and we're really in the midst of developing a number of scenarios from identified gaps that were identified in phase 2 and some in phase 3. And with input from a variety of stakeholders, we're looking at how to fill gaps and different approaches we could take to modernize infrastructure going forward. In phase 4, we will detail, so really in this phase, we're developing scenarios, and we're in the midst of developing 3 scenarios to address the gaps that we've identified. And we will be bringing those out for more stakeholder engagement and then to Metro Council later this year in November. And then we will move on to phase 4, where we'll detail a preferred scenario based on Metro Council's direction and input. And then we will identify best roles for different sectors in this work, and also determine a financing approach for Metro to build or improve the facilities that are prioritized. And then in the final phase, all of this work will be compiled into a draft plan for stakeholder review, and then finalized into a plan for Metro Council to consider for adoption.
Steve, can I ask a question?
Yes.
I struggle a little bit with like the overarching themes without like specifics. So I was curious, like if a specific example, like the Hillsborough landfill, right, is going to be at capacity, say in the next 10 to 15 years, and then all of that construction debris now needs to go somewhere else. Is that something that this would address?
Well, we are mostly looking at Metro's facilities in the context of the private and nonprofit and other facilities that are in our region. So we really, really can only control sort of what Metro is choosing to do in a way in terms of building new facilities and the role that we play. We are in this study, we aren't looking at landfill capacity head on. We know that there is capacity, lots of capacity in Arlington for years and years and years. Hillsborough landfill is a private facility. We're not looking in detail at sort of that capacity issue in this plan, no.
Okay, so are landfills in general outside of the scope of this? This is like the transfer stations and those kind of, is that?
We're looking at material flow, and we're going to get into that in a little bit more here. So no, we're not looking at landfills in particular. That is outside of the scope, but because most of the region's garbage goes to Arlington, and we're really looking at ways to decrease the amount of materials going to landfills to decrease the need for continuing to send more and more and more materials to landfill. That's really the goal here.
SD, I think Ashwin's raises a valid point, or I thought though, and I don't know how much this has been considered because I haven't really thought of it myself.
Mm-hmm.
If the Hillsborough landfill is no longer a C&D or asbestos disposal option near the region, I understand they're technically one tax slot outside of the metro boundary, but that is going to impact the system inside of Metro because much of that waste does flow there. So if that option disappears in 2 decades and whatever the scope, the time frame of these plans are, that could change the way C&D material flows through the Metro system. It could change the outlets and options for asbestos containing waste materials to flow through the Metro system. So that will, regardless of whether you have direct control over it, impact the Metro system in terms of transfer and disposal, I think, and that's important to consider at least.
Yeah. I don't know if Luis, you.
Yeah, so we have gotten similar questions about what we are usually call end markets, right? Landfills are the end market for the commodity called garbage. Metro has traditionally focused on the transfer system, how to get the material from haulers and from the public, and then send it to end markets, such as the Hillsborough landfill, the Arlington landfill, to material recovery facilities, to paper mills that recycle paper, cardboard, etc. So because of that traditional focus, and because we have very aging, very old facilities, Metro Central and Metro South, this project started with that specific purpose in mind: what to do with Metro Central and Metro South as transfer stations. And we're looking now at a comprehensive. We're taking a comprehensive look at the system. And we're getting these questions of what to do about end markets and landfill capacity, and what if there are not enough composting facilities. And the way we are, well, first of all, we're collecting information, and we are trying to assess how much of it could we handle through this project, but at the very least note all the information that we've been hearing, like you pointed out today, and put recommendations in the final plan to either, you know, keep an eye on the landfill capacity for special, you know, waste like construction and demolition debris, or landfill capacity for wet waste, as things that we have heard throughout the project that need to be resolved in the short term or medium term or future term. But in many cases, we won't be able to address that gap through this plan, because this is, you can think of this as a capital infrastructure plan. So the question is, would Metro build a landfill to solve that gap? And that is very, very, very historically not something that Metro has done. So I don't know if that kind of explains. So it's the question is, if there's a gap, could Metro fill that gap by building a facility? And landfills are very hard to site and build. So, but it is something that we can note and recommend. Metro needs to keep an eye on it and develop solutions, because it, like Tom is saying, it would have an impact, significant impact on the system. And if we are trucking that waste to landfills in Washington or other places in Oregon, it will increase costs at the curb, right?
Oh, thanks, that helps a lot.
Thanks for asking. So I'm going to just breeze over this a bit, but just to know that in phase 1, we did establish a set of values and outcomes to guide the plan and to really be able to know what we're working towards and what's expected to be accomplished by the plan. And these were really based, 9 of them really came straight out of that regional waste plan that I started with. We added 1 new value and around tribal consultation. And so under each of these values, we have a series of outcomes. The flyer we sent ahead of time has a summary of those on page 2. But that was really the work of the first phase. And then in the second phase of the plan, last fall, we organized a series of roundtables and meetings with stakeholders to identify gaps in the infrastructure that could require a new facility or changes to existing facilities in the region. And so we met with these partners that are listed here in roundtables, and we also met with a project community advisory group, 8 individuals that represent historically marginalized communities. Actually, we've been meeting with them monthly on this project. And we also talked with employees that work in operations at our existing facilities and in direct service roles. And our goal really with that was to engage various affected stakeholders in the region while prioritizing community members who are highly impacted by the system, but who have in the past historically have not had access to influence decision-making. And so we gathered all of the comments and identified needs and analyzed them to come up with a list of the most common identified gaps by our stakeholders, which is what you're seeing to the right. And in just a minute, you'll hear from Luis about some additional work that we did even more recently to identify gaps through research and mapping. We call it our technical analysis work. But first, I'd like to share a few of the gaps identified through the engagement that really were specific to Washington County and align with some of the themes on the right. So just a couple of those to point out is that we heard that people who live in Washington County, as well as Multnomah County, have a long distance to travel to access a public transfer station, and that the private transfer stations in Washington County are more costly for the public to use. We also heard that people who live in Washington County, as well as parts of Clackamas County, have less or no convenient access to household hazardous waste, permanent facility, and also less access to reuse and repair services. We heard that collection events are a popular way of getting rid of items for disposal, but these events need better advertising, more frequency, more consistency, and better language access, and like having more language ability to help people that are speaking languages other than English. Access to facilities and services is a primary issue in Washington County. Seniors with mobility issues, multifamily residents, people who speak a language other than English, and people with low incomes have the highest needs. And while I think some of these issues cut across our region, I just wanted to point out that this was specific, these were specifically stated by Washington County stakeholders. Just two others, if a transfer station, we heard that if a transfer station or collection facility were built on the Cornelius site, which some of you are familiar with, maybe others aren't, but Metro purchased a site, an industrial site in Cornelius that's about 11 acres in 2020 to build some set of services, waste and recovery and reuse services on. But we heard that cities in the southern parts of Washington County, like King City, Tigard, Sherwood, would still not, they still wouldn't feel like they have accessible services at that Cornelius location. And then also we heard that community-based organizations with roots in Washington County are good ways to reach community for educating folks on garbage and recycling. And these organizations have had success in hosting collection events and reach many people. So organizations like Centro Cultural and Virginia Garcia are some of those. So just wanted to give you a smattering of Washington County.
Yeah. Question on that one also. So when you say like the stakeholders provided input and that's how you came out with that, is it just like, is it like quantifiable in some degree? Because maybe the specific one is like household waste. You know, I've found that to be pretty accessible through all the drop-off events and things like that. Maybe not as much after the pandemic. So I'm just kind of curious, like what, like specifically how that came up.
Sure, we'd made a log of over 800 comments that we heard from all different stakeholders that I mentioned, and we actually put themes around them, and then we lifted up the ones that were most commonly said. And you're going to hear in a minute from Luis about how we paired that with actually the research and mapping work, but we just wanted to highlight what was most commonly said. And those themes weren't specific to Washington County. They were all the stakeholders region-wide.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Brian, your question also?
Oh,
Yeah, just real quick. So looking at the 23 report, you know, 16.1, 2, and 6 have the in process but facing obstacles. Is the locations, because they're all related to transfer station, is it the locations themselves you're getting resistance trying to find them, or once you found them, you're getting resistance trying to set them up?
That's a great question. I'm just looking at my goal. You said one, which one? Sorry.
16.1, 16.2, and 16.6. It's locate garbage transfer, locate transfer for food scraps, and improve access to Metro South.
Lisa, you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you know the regional waste plan better than I at this point, but I think some of them they just haven't been started due to staffing capacity. I don't know those in particular, but I will say what you're bringing up in terms of locating, finding appropriate land is a really big challenge. And we felt lucky really to secure that Cornelius site in 2020. We had a similar search for a property in finding industrial land in Clackamas County to try to think about reciting all or some of Metro South, and it was very, very limited. As we all know, industrial land is so hard to locate. But Luis, did you have any comments on those other?
Well, you know, those are very, very different actions. They're all related, they're very different. So the challenges or the obstacles are kind of different, especially for organics, food waste is because that touches another, again, on like closer to an end market rather than transfer, and so it gets blurry. But I think the challenges that Esti mentioned are some of those challenges, and then the other kind of overarching theme for those actions is that council asked staff, Metro Council asked us staff to do this garbage and recycling system facilities plan to take a more of a systems look at the problem, as opposed to focusing only facility by facility. And so that is another reason why those actions are kind of on hold. So it's not like an obstacle, but they're on hold until this system facilities plan looks at system-wide solutions, more comprehensive solutions, and especially those that address reuse, recycling, and composting. So council is pushing us to do more in those areas, as opposed to building more facilities to handle garbage.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So I wanted to show a quick 2-minute video. Hey, Luis, can you see the new tab that I put up there?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I hope that the sound will work. Kathy, thanks for checking. I'm just hoping that it works automatically, but if not, tell me, and then I'll figure out how to make the sound work. But basically I wanted to show this because this was we took our community advisory group members to 4 existing facilities in March to learn more about our system and see some facilities and in the both reuse, recycling and garbage system. And just wanted to sort of highlight this quick video that summarizes the tour and some of what our community members learned. So let's see if this, first of all, this, and then play it. Can you hear it, Luis?
No sound.
Maybe we don't need sound because it has all the words on it.
That's fine.
Sorry, it has some good music. But... Well, it's buffering. Okay, sorry for no sound, but that is also on our website. And feel free to check it out. Okay, going back to the presentation. So I would like to turn it over to Luis now to talk a little bit about the technical work we've been doing in phase 3.
Thanks, Esty. So as Esty mentioned, we found those gaps, facility gaps through engagement in phase 2. And in phase 3, we have been doing sort of a more systematic look at the system in case looking at different material streams like yard debris, recycling depots, facilities that accept food waste, etc. Both from the perspective of haulers that collect those materials from the public, from homes and businesses, as well as from people taking that waste to a facility. And we have done this systematic look in order to complement the gaps identified through engagement. We did that for 2 reasons. One of the main reasons was to make sure that we didn't miss some of those material streams that were not discussed as much during the engagement, especially those that affect commercial haulers. Engagement focused on the facilities that are open to the public for the most part. And then I think your SD, there you go. And then the other reason is to provide more information on the gaps that were identified through engagement, to get more information on where those specific gaps were felt the strongest. So in order to do that, we have been doing mapping work. I think we can go to the next slide, Esty. The main way we are assessing gaps is by looking at driving times to the nearest facility for those different material streams. In total, we're looking at about like 14, 15 material streams, both from the perspective of the public or the commercial haulers. And so this is an example of one of the material streams that we're looking at, which is household hazardous waste. So in the region, we only have 2 permanent household hazardous waste facilities. One is Metro Central in North Portland, and the other one is Metro South in Oregon City. And here you can see the dark blue areas are areas of the region that have the longest driving times to the nearest HHW facility. And so even though we have a collection of events, we have been hearing through engagement in this project and in previous projects that the events are great, but they tend to be crowded because everyone wants to go to attend those events. And so they are not really a substitute for permanent household hazardous waste facilities that are open, 7 days a week and at convenient hours. So this is one way in which we're saying, okay, well, we see gaps, especially in Washington County and East Multnomah County in terms of driving times to the nearest facility. And I see Brian has
Yeah, just a quick question. So what this map shows me very clearly is Washington County is growing, but the metro boundary is not. And is there any chance to change the metro boundary so that you could have more options to place a transfer station that could hit that dark blue area there that we see that clearly needs service?
That's a good question. Our system, because it's a mixed system of private and public facilities and nonprofit facilities, we do actually have facilities outside of the metro boundary that take waste from the public. It depends on what type of waste. So far, Metro has not chosen to site any facility outside of the metro boundary, but it is a good point. I don't think there are any restrictions on Metro citing a facility outside of the metro boundary, but it tends to be a little more challenging. And then it's cities and counties have the authority to regulate land use. Metro has an indirect role in that. So to cite a specific facility, it's usually the city or the county in which that site is located that has the authority to say yes or no, this is allowed, this is not allowed. But that's a good question. This map doesn't show so much population per se, but we are actually looking at population and we're taking into account the fact some of the differences in growth in population across the region. The next slide is an example of a material stream, which is this is more like the material stream is recyclables. And in this case, we're showing the facilities that are open to the public that accept a wide variety of materials from recycling. This doesn't include facilities that specialize in only a couple of materials. Like there are metal recyclers, for example, that tend to accept metal from the public, but only metal. So you have to go to that facility to drop off your metal, and then to another facility to drop plastics or cardboard, etc. So this shows recycling, what we usually call recycling depots. And in this case, it's a situation in which the gaps are not as stark as with HHW, household hazardous waste. We also heard through engagement that Metro should focus on creating one-stop shop locations for the public to drop recyclables. So that's why we're focusing on facilities that take a wide range of recyclables from the public. So this is kind of examples of how we have been identifying gaps to complement the engagement work that we did during phase 2. Next slide, Esty. Please, thank you. So as during this phase 3, we the next step after identifying gaps is developing scenarios. And these scenarios are basically ways to solve the gaps that were identified during phase 2 and 3. Scenario planning is a way to plan for the future by exploring different possible paths or solutions in the future. And scenario planning supports decision making, and it provides a framework for talking about different possible outcomes. Next slide, please. This graphic illustrates the process we're following for this plan. In the first phase of the plan, we identify the values and outcomes for this project. Then we moved on to identifying gaps in the system. And as we have been talking about, we're focusing mostly on the gaps related to the transfer side of things. But we are collecting the information about the end markets and what to do about those. And now we're in the phase where we're developing plausible scenarios with solutions to address those gaps. And in the last phase, we would, or in a step 4, we would be going back to show those scenarios and solutions to different stakeholder groups, to the public, and eventually to Metro Council for their consideration, so that they can select, okay, we like this solution better, or how about you combine all these possible solutions to create a preferred scenario, a preferred approach to resolving those gaps. And this could involve Metro building new facilities, or Metro, keeping only the existing facilities that we own and operate, depending on what we hear, the feedback that we hear. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, we're basically working right now really hard to develop, you see 4 scenarios on the screen, but scenario A is the status quo. So it's a baseline scenario. What is the current situation? What would happen if Metro only maintains the facilities that Metro owns today and operates? So the 3 scenarios that we're developing are B, C, and D, in which we're exploring different solutions to the gaps that were identified, that range from Metro relying more on the private sector and the nonprofit sector to build more reuse and recycling facilities, to Metro building more transfer stations, more recycling depots, etc. Each of the scenarios is going to have key information, including what would be Metro's role under that scenario, what would happen to Metro's existing facilities under that scenario. For example, do we get rid of Metro South? Do we redevelop Metro South to become only a public facility? Or do we redevelop Metro South to become only a commercial facility? And then it will include some cost ranges, so that we can assess a range of costs of how this scenario would be, between this and that amount versus scenario C or D. And then we have also developed criteria to evaluate and compare the scenarios in terms of, cost is one of them, but then also in terms of how much impact would each scenario have on the amount of material that is recovered for reuse, recycling, and composting. So kind of the environmental benefits of each scenario, as well as which scenario would increase access, going back to those driving time maps, which scenario would provide more access to facilities for people in the region. Next slide, please. And the major milestones in phase 3 will be to finalizing these draft scenarios that we've been talking about, then reviewing them with stakeholders, and then bringing them to council for review and direction, which we expect to happen in November. Prior to going to Metro Council, which is the elected body, just like, you know, Washington County has a board of commissioners, we have the Metro Council that makes the decisions. We tend to go to a range of advisory committees, such as the garbage, you know, just like Washington County has a garbage and recycling advisory committee, Metro has a garbage and recycling advisory committee too. And we go to all these committees for input, collect that information, and bring it to council. As Esty mentioned, Tom and Vinod have been involved in this process, and we expect to continue to keep them involved once we develop the scenarios. We also have a community advisory group, like we showed on the video, and some of the members actually live in Washington County. So that community advisory group brings a range of perspectives from across the region. You know, some people live in Multnomah County, some in Clackamas County, some in Washington County. And I think the last slide that we have for you today has information of about more information about the project on our project website, and our email contact information in case you want to follow up. Thank you. That was a lot.
Yeah, thank you. Really good though. I think it was very easy to comprehend. Brian, do you have a question?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, I was on mute. So just real quick. So is phase 4 like the action to, like, once they vote on it in November, then the plan will be released on when changes will hit and target deadlines? Is that fair to say?
The decision will be it won't be a vote yet. There's a phase 5. So, you know, we try to keep this presentation short, but phase 4 is basically council gives us a direction on which scenario they want us to explore further. And then we go back to the, you know, drawing board and detail that scenario so that we come up with, okay, under this scenario, we will build this facility in the next 5 years, these other 2 within the next 10 years. This is a 20-year plan. So we don't expect to build all the facilities at once, because that would be very expensive and very, very hard to do.
So it would be fair to say that me, as common resident of Washington County, would not see any relief for a good 10 years.
I'm not sure about 10 years, but definitely not next year.
Okay.
Yeah, because it takes time, and then, you know, it took a really long time to find the Cornelius site, for example. And as Esty mentioned, we felt very lucky to have found that, but we did not find a site in the Clackamas County for you know, replacing a Metro South, and so it takes a lot of.
Okay, I was just trying to get a rough idea of the timelines. The
But I think
expectations.
depending on what scenarios we move forward with, some of them have potentially shorter time frames, because they might, if you know, if we build smaller, more distributed facilities, those might actually be somewhat easier to site. And so that's getting into a little bit of detail, but it's like, if we're going for a full big transfer station and finding new land, that probably would be longer. But if it's smaller, more distributed, that could be less. So it's dependent, and that's some of what we need to look at is feasibility, right, of these different scenarios.
Right, it's always the details. Oh yeah.
You guys at the beginning mentioned.
Oh, sorry, Ashwin. I was just going to use the opportunity to make another Tom Eggleston shameless plug for the 600,000 folks in Washington County that need household hazardous waste disposal options. So I know you guys hear that from me a lot, and I know your team is working on the events side, but more we would appreciate always. Thank you.
I have you on that. I do, from your perspective, and maybe others on the call, you know, we're looking at these different options and possibilities, and it's like we know that more collection events are needed. We also know that like a stable sort of building, you know, HHW facility is really needed. But I'm just from when you say that, are you think in your head, are you thinking ultimately it's building something on the ground, you know, permanent, or are you know, do you think more events could appease or
My feeling is that as a growing and large community, and like I said, we're up to 600,000 community members in Washington County now, that it would be logical that there would be more than even one place to take household hazardous waste any day of the year and not having to wait for a collection event. So I think multiple locations in Washington County. I mean, we have communities like, you know, Hood River County that has 60,000 residents and they have a permanent year-round facility in their community. And so I think we do have central and south, but driving down 26 is tough and it changes a lot of decisions and behaviors. From Forest Grove, that's a long haul. And I'm worried that much of that waste is ending up in the solid waste system, getting managed as garbage and wet waste, not where it should be in the household hazardous waste side of things. So.
Yeah, I would also vote for more collection events because I enjoy those, but yeah, I tend to build up materials for such a long time now and wait in a very long line with my trunk full of hazardous chemicals. So I agree with Tom's point as well. Also, at the beginning, you mentioned you added tribal engagement, and then it was kind of on your second to last slide. Continue. It's just curious what that's specifically calling out.
Well, that is new territory for Metro as an agency, and especially for the waste prevention and environmental services. Usually, you don't associate tribal consultation with solid waste management or plan or activity. But we are, because of the potential for ground disturbing activities when you build facilities to impact cultural, historical, and natural resources that are important to tribal nations, tribal governments. That is why we're doing this consultation as part of for the project. And basically the essence of what we originally had in mind is we want not only to meet the minimum requirements to protect those resources, but we want to follow best practices that have been developed by different tribes in Oregon and Washington that have ties to this region, right? These are for whose tribes these were their ancestral lands. So that is the beginning of a conversation, and we sent out letters to 7 tribal governments, and this is not a community engagement activity. This is a government to government engagement. So basically the way it works is we ask if they are interested in working on this project to provide their input and their recommendations. And it is of course truly up to them to say yes, no, or only on this or only on that, and that's what we have done. And we have heard so far from 3 tribes expressing some interest, and you have to take into account that solid waste is usually the least. They have multiple requests for tribal consultation from many different projects, different agencies, state, local, federal. And so we have heard so far from 3 that are potentially interested in providing input for this project, and we're still talking to them.
Okay.
Some of the things that we have heard so far is that they do want to participate once we have the list of facilities, to make sure that we create a mechanism so that we consult for each of those facility projects with them to see how it affects their interests.
Oh, I was just curious for Tom and Kathy, have we found any potential sites? I'm not asking you to name anything, but like that we can recommend in South Washington County or Southwest Washington County to Metro Is that something that is ongoing or has even not been started? I'm just curious.
So the county doesn't play a role in facility siting or development or management. That's Metro's authority and jurisdiction in the Metro region. So we fully rely on Metro for that.
What about like just outside the boundary? Would that still be Metro or not us?
So I think Luis was saying there's not necessarily I think there's no legal reason Metro could not site a facility right outside the boundaries of the Metro region that might come with political ramifications in terms of how that would play out in terms of siting. There is, the county has land use rules and regulations around where solid waste facilities can be sited. And the Oregon has very strict requirements to protect farmland and EF exclusive farm use land that makes it really difficult to site facilities. That conversation usually comes up when we talk about compost facilities because they're more associated with farming activities, and oftentimes the answer or the suggestion of an answer to a stinky compost facility near a neighborhood is we should put it out in the, out in the farm community where those activities are more compatible potentially, but that's not allowed in Oregon in land use laws. So there is a lot of land use dynamics in terms of how that plays out.
We do, once we get direction, we do hope to reach out, work with the counties and the city's land use planning staff, because we absolutely need to be ideally in walking the same steps forward to look for sites that are both accessible and it's an allowed use, right? And so we do need to sort of approach this in cooperation in the best of worlds.
Any last questions for our presenters? Otherwise, we can say thank you for coming here and presenting that. Really, really interesting, really well done. So appreciate it. I think we're leaving here well educated on the subject. So thank you.
Thanks. And yeah, I think with Tom and Vinod, you're in good hands. So if you have further questions or want to track it, they're good to stay in touch with, as well as our website. You can sign on our website to be a project subscriber, and then you'll get updates, not too many.
Good to know.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Cool. The last item on the agenda is opportunity for public comment. Give it a little bit to see if public attendees would like to comment. Go ahead, Kathy. Or yeah, any fun news to
Kathy
share?
Folsom, Hillsboro, Oregon.
No, I was just
Would you
gonna
like-
say, I'm not a public commenter. I thought we were done, but then maybe we were. I just wanted to let you folks know that I got a couple of late breaking invitations from our service providers that came tonight that if the committee is interested, they would love to have y'all do a ride along, an en route ride along in a big old garbage truck or a
Ooh.
recycling truck. So maybe that could happen in lieu of one of those summer meetings. That you could go out and see just how all of that works and see their onboard equipment. And then Dave with Waste Management also offered to do a tour of the Forest Grove operations. So
What's in Forest Grove?
transfer station.
Okay.
And they have a truck CNG fuel fleet.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool to see how they fuel and charge their compressed natural gas trucks.
So I told them
Okay.
that you all would be interested. I just felt like I knew that you would, but more to come. We'll circle back and try and get something coordinated and see when they have availability, but sometime over the next several weeks, maybe we can set something up. And I don't know that the GRAC committee members have gone on ride-alongs before, so kind of cool. I've done it. It's pretty fun.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Maybe, I don't know if people have been to the Metro transfer station for hazardous waste, but that's also a really nice spot. And you can basically ad hoc get a tour there. I don't know if we want to do that as a group or just people should take that opportunity. It's really cool. They give you a really good detailed explanation of how they deal with it. So
Every time I go, they say, don't get out of your car. So, yeah.
Sign up for a tour first, and then they'll take you inside and
The appropriate response is don't get out of your car.
They also have a Metro Paint facility that is really cool, where they actually recycle the paint into new paint. And it has a lot of art installments because they give a lot of their paint out to artists to do art installments. And so I've heard it's a really pretty awesome tour as well.
I'm going to ask a really silly question. And so transfer stations, could we ever like build them like underground so that you don't have to worry about the smells and stuff getting them out? Or is that just not really feasible?
I mean, if you wanted to pay for it, I guess there's nothing that prevents it
Fine.
from happening, right?
I'm just saying, I mean, if you don't want to blight on the landscape, you could just be like, go underground and drop the stuff, but I don't know. I like to think out of the box. I just wanted to get if that even might be feasible.
well, if you can call it. Thank you everybody for attending, for active participation. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night, guys.
Yeah,
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
okay, bye-bye.
Thank you for attending the June 8th Garbage and Recycling Advisory Committee meeting. This meeting was recorded and will be posted to the website within 1 week. Thank you.